So we're about to get into chapter 20 of the book of Matthew. However, before we get into chapter 20, I wanted to go back because I do believe there was more to the last passage that we covered. And even today, after today, I still felt, after I wrote down my notes and I looked at it, like, man, there's still so much more that we can elaborate here. However, because we've been into the book of Matthew quite some time, more than a year. And it's not that I want to push it to finish it, because we still got at least another year before we even get to the end of the book. But I thought I'd give a little bit more explanation. So before we get into chapter 20, I'm going to go back to 19. However, let's read together. If you stand up, join me together so that we may read chapter 20 together. And it says, verse 1, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. Now, when he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace and said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right I will give you.' So they went. Again, he went about the sixth hour and ninth hour and did likewise. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing idle, and said to them, 'Why have you been standing here idle all day?' They said to him, 'Because no one hired us.' He said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right you will receive.' So when evening had come, the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, 'Call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning with the last to the first.' And when those came who were hired about the 11th hour, they each received a denarius. But when the first came, they supposed that they would receive more, and they likewise received each a denarius. And when they had received it, they complained against the landowner, saying, 'These men have worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal to us, so have borne the burden in the heat of the day.' But he answered one of them and said, 'Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Do you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what is yours and go your way. I wish to give to this last man the same as to you. Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own things? Or is your eye evil because I am good?' So the last will be first and the first last. For many are called, but few chosen." Now Jesus, going to Jerusalem, took the 12 disciples aside on the road and said to them, "Behold, we are going to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and to the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles to mock and scourge and to crucify. And the third day he will rise again." Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. And he said to her, "What do you wish?" She said to him, "Grant that these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right and one on the other, in your kingdom." But Jesus answered and said, "You do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" They said to him, "We are able." So he said to them, "You will indeed drink my cup, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with. But to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give, but it is for those of whom it is prepared by my Father." And when the 10 heard it, they were greatly displeased with the two brothers. But Jesus called them to himself and said, "You know that the ruler of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever desires to be first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." Now, as they went out of Jericho, a great multitude followed him. And behold, two blind men sitting by the road, when they heard that Jesus was passing by, cried out, saying, Have mercy on us, O Lord, Son of David. Then the multitude warned them that they should be quiet. But they cried out all the more, saying, Have mercy on us, O Lord, Son of David. So Jesus stood still and called them and said, What do you want me to do for you? They said to him, Lord, that our eyes may be opened. So Jesus had compassion and touched their eyes. And immediately their eyes received sight and they followed him. You may have a seat. In the same way as last week's comment or question by Peter, in the same way that he was asking, we sometimes as Christians, we ask a similar question. Peter, last week in chapter 19, verse 27, he said, Then Peter answered and said to him, speaking to Jesus, he could say, See, Jesus, we have left all and followed you. Therefore, what shall we have? What he was asking, Peter to Jesus, is like, what do we have? What is our return investment during, part of what we're going to be receiving in heaven? What do we have? Because we give up, the very little that we did have. What are we going to receive in exchange? And remember, they're thinking about in materialistic things. They're thinking financially. What do we receive in return? Because the question and the comments that were happening at the time had to do with material. And in the way that we think about it, or the way we ask sometimes, too often, I should say, we get consumed by such. What clothes should I wear? What vehicle should I drive? What house or where should I live? And in those questions that we ask, notice how we have choices. We get to pick where we live, what clothes to wear, what vehicle to drive. Of course, within our budgets, I'm hoping, but we have a choice. As opposed to many other countries, or like 90% of the rest of the world, they don't have a choice. But we do. That's a good thing. Now, while those are necessities that we need for everyday life, those very same things can easily and quickly consume us to the point where they become idols and almost sometimes, little g, gods. Especially when it comes to another person or people. We often sometimes say, I've met a lot of people who have made their family almost into gods. They had to be there, they had to serve them. Not simply be there present with them, but no, they had made them more important than God Himself in service to God. And so it can quickly turn into such a thing. Now think about this. In a 7-day week, how many hours do we have? If anybody is good at math, how many hours do we have? We have I had to write it down. So don't think I've got it on top of my head. I had to write it down. 168 hours in a 7-day week. So in those 168 hours, we approximately spent 60 of those hours at work or commuting. Roughly 60 hours, which leave us with 108 hours. Now, out of those hours, you slept approximately 49 hours in a 7-day work week. Now, 28 hours, more or less, roughly, we spent it on prepping and dining or eating, prepping our meals and eating. Whether that was in the morning or in the evening, whichever it was. Now, maybe you spent about, in that 1 week, about 12 hours visiting family, or going to somebody's birthday party, a wedding, some kind of celebration, 12 hours. which then leaves you or leaves us with approximately, anybody keeping track?
No, sorry.
About 19 hours. Then 3 hours would probably do grocery shopping throughout the week. One day, 3 hours going to spending the day at an hour at HEB. I know this one because that's what I did yesterday. 3 hours at HEB or wherever you shop. Then you spend another 6 hours just miscellaneous errands that you have to do, laundry, who knows, mowing your lawn, whatever. There's always something that needs to get done. And then maybe you spend some time, an hour each day, relaxing after work or after dinner. You just want to sit and relax. And by now, you end up with 5 hours left in the work week, 7 days. If you do attend a Wednesday night service and Sunday morning service, it takes you about 2 hours being here, driving to and fro, being here 2 hours, which now it's 4 hours spent out of your week. You're left with maybe 1 hour. Out of that time, I never mentioned about serving the Lord. Because we are so easily consumed with all these other things that we have to go, and we got to get done, and they're all important. But we don't take priority that God should come first out of all these things. And then when you do come to church, oftentimes you're exhausted. Now, I'm not saying this to shame you. I'm saying this so that keep this in mind as we get into the study this morning and I begin to develop it, because it's easy for us to think it like the disciples were thinking. What am I going to get in return if I follow you, Jesus? What am I going to give up? And if I do give it up, is it going to be comparable? Is it going to be something that I am pleased with? Because admit it, we are very selfish. We all are. I know I am. I'm very selfish. You can ask my wife. I am very selfish. She's not going to tell you otherwise. She'll in a heartbeat, yes. Now, I said I want to spend a little bit more time in chapter 19. So let's go to chapter 19, verse 27. Then Peter answered and said to him, "See, we have left all and followed you. Therefore, what shall we have?" So Jesus said to them, even though Peter was the one that asked, he answered everybody, "Surely I say to you that in the regeneration, when the Son of Man sits on the throne of his glory, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or wife or children or lands for my name's sake shall receive 100-fold and inherit eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and the last first." So arriving in heaven will definitely, no matter who you are, no matter how young, how old you are, definitely is going to be joyous. We're going to be glad that we're there. We're going to see with different eyes. There are many beautiful places here on earth. Other countries, I like spending a lot of times where there's wooded area, camping, open fields. And there are many countries, and even here in the United States, there are many places in the United States where there are beautiful places. But they will never compare to the beauty that is in store for us and waiting for us in heaven. And we cannot even begin to imagine what that looks like because we don't have our heavenly bodies. Our heavenly eyes are going to be able to see completely different than what we already see. So it's going to be joyous no matter what. When we get there, we will definitely be worshiping the Lord. We're going to fall at his feet, and we're going to do what I just got my name's crossed. We're going to be casting our crowns to his feet, Paul. We're going to be casting our crowns to his feet and worshiping him. Now, That's not all we're going to be doing in heaven. When we're in His heavenly kingdom, we're going to have jobs. And you may think, oh, I work so hard all week long and we're still going to have a job. It's going to be different. We're going to be looking forward to actually, we're going to be eager to step into what the Lord will assign to us. And each one of us are going to be assigned something different. And it's going to be based, each one individually, it's going to be based on how we currently here on earth are serving Him. That's going to be part of the reward. Now, you and I have already been judged whether we're going to heaven or not. If you are saved, we've already been judged. And we are guiltless because of Him. But there will be one more judging that will take place when we get to heaven, and that's going to be our works, what we have done. Not the works for us to achieve heaven, but the works that we have already done or are doing or are supposed to be doing here on earth because we've already received heaven. That's a fact. There's no way that you can lose it if you truly have accepted Jesus and truly repented. Now those jobs are going to vary, like I said. In Luke chapter 12, verse 48, the latter part, speaking of the faithful servant, says, "For everyone to whom much is given, from him much will be required. And to whom much is committed, of him they will ask the more." True faithful Christianity is not a blasé lifestyle, meaning that you just, I'm a Christian, oh well. That's not what we're called to do. That's not who we were called to be or destined to be. In His kingdom, in His economy, we Christians are called to serve Him and His people. We are to be in His service at whatever capacity we are able to. And like I said, all of us will have different jobs in heaven at whatever capacity we are able to serve Him here. And what we do here will reflect what we will be doing later on in heaven, which means that during the time that we spend here, we have to sacrifice many things. And those things are going to be things that hinder the work for the kingdom, His work. We learned back in Matthew 16, verse 24, Jesus said to His disciples, "If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me." When Jesus said let him deny himself, He meant let him die to himself. And something definitely has to die, or someone has to die. Picking up the cross means something has to be sacrificed. Something has to be crucified on this cross. And this something has to be given up. And oftentimes, I said already, it oftentimes also means someone has to be given up. Because this someone or somebody or some people sometimes holds us back from truly following the Lord and serving the Lord. The some things could be work, could be careers, could be education, could be anything. Even simply taking care of your house, because you want to have a pristine house that is the best on the block, that can easily consume you. Now, in the time of Jesus, because He was speaking to the 12 disciples, they were common, everyday fishermen. That was the common thing to be. In the time of Jesus, in the culture, it meant that whatever profession the father had, or the grandfather, or the great grandfather had, the children that followed after would have the same profession. So if the disciples' father was a fisherman, obviously they became fishermen. And their children after them would become fishermen as well. because this was often the family business. And so the family business was passed down or inherited to the people who were coming behind him. And so when Jesus called them, if you think back when he called the disciples, when he called them, they left. They denied, they sacrificed, they left this behind in exchange to serve Jesus, to follow Jesus. This is why now, fast forward to where we're at, Peter asked the question, we give up all these things, including our inheritance, including our very livelihood. So we gave it up, and we're not going to receive any inheritance from my Father. What do we have in exchange? So this is a mentality. So for us to better understand where Peter's coming from, this is their culture. For us in the Western world, we don't live in those terms. Even though some of us, or your parents probably did receive an inheritance, they didn't lose the inheritance when they became a believer, or you didn't lose it when you became a believer. However, I know that was the case for me. At one point, my parents did say, "You're no longer my son." Fast forward to today, that has all changed. But in their culture, once they followed Jesus, it meant that they were losing everything. They were disowned, even to the point where sometimes they would be removed from the family lineage or their family tree. They would remove their names. That's how, and even went to the extent to where they would do a funeral pretending that that one son or that one daughter, whoever it was, actually died, and they did a funeral for that person. You're dead to me. That's pretty much. So again, this is why Peter asked, what shall we have? So Jesus says to him, you will have a career in my government, in my kingdom. You're going to be sitting in 12 thrones and judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Now that's going to be a responsibility, if you may, one of the top responsibilities that somebody's going to have in heaven, to judge the tribes of Israel. And to judge them, if you think back at the Old Testament, how much chaos they caused, how much trouble they got themselves into. He said, you're going to sit with me and judge Israel. Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, the first part of Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6 says, for unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and the government, meaning the government of his kingdom, will be upon his shoulders. In other words, he's going to bear it, not the government here on earth, though that's going to change later on when the millennium reign is here. But you and I will also have ruling responsibilities during the millennium reign. To some of us, will be given the responsibility to rule over a township, or maybe a city, or who knows, a county, a state, or a country. However, the capital of the world is going to be in Jerusalem, and Jesus, King Jesus, is going to be sitting there, and we're going to be going back and forth, back and forth. Who knows? We don't know exactly what that's going to look like. Maybe we're going to be dealing with people who are not, being used yet. Dealing with people who were not caught in the rapture, who are still here. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but we're going to be dealing with some type of priority in his government. All of us are going to. Now, Matthew chapter 8, verse 18 through 22, when this was talking regarding the cost of discipleship. When Jesus was telling everybody that, if you follow me, there's going to be a cost. And we covered the study already. But if you remember, this individual who said, the disciple, let me first go bury my father. And Jesus responded to him, follow me. Let the dead bury the dead. But he was saying, Jesus was saying, let the spiritual dead bury the spiritual dead. And the reason this disciple was saying, let me first go bury my father. It wasn't that he was dead or he was dying. Again, this is going back to what I said, the inheritance and the family business. What this disciple was saying, like, hey, Jesus, hold on. I'm going to be the one who inherits my father's business. He's not dead yet. So could you just wait a little longer? Let him die. Let me take care of the family business. Then I'm going to inherit everything. Then I will be financially set to be able to follow you. That's his thinking. And Jesus told them, no, that's not how it is. That's not what faith is. So again, going back to what Peter asked, what do we have? Because it meant that they would be losing everything. And Jesus responds to the disciples back in chapter 19, you will receive 100-fold. In other words, you give up all these things, you're going to receive 100-fold. Now, in Luke chapter 18, he tells us something different pertaining to the passage that we're in chapter 19. So I want us to look at chapter 18 of Luke together. Chapter 18, and go down to verse 28. Then Peter said, see, we have left all and followed you. Verse 29. So he said to them, Jesus responding, I say to you, there is no one who has left house or parents or brothers or wife or children for the sake of the kingdom of God, who shall not receive many times more, and this is why I brought you here, in this present time, and in the age to come, eternal life. So before we proceed, I want us to understand that this is not a formula, nor did Luke say this is the formula to have the prosperity gospel happen to us. In this present time. That's not what Jesus is talking about. And many have taken it out of context to mean just that. You give up all these things, Jesus is going to give it to you now and this time and this earth as you are alive. That's not what it means. In this time, though it is during the lifetime of the person, what Jesus is saying is that when we give up something, and in some of the cases is we give up our family, or our family, shun us or pushes us out of their life, we lose them. So we lose family. Sometimes it means, that's why Jesus said, sometimes you may lose your husband, your wife, your children. Or if you're a child, it means that you may lose your parents. They're going to push you out of their lives. And so what Jesus is saying, what you're going to receive in this present age, is going to be far better, far more superior, because now I'm going to give you 100-fold. You lost your family. I'm going to give you now a spiritual family. And that spiritual family is far greater than an earthly family. Think about this. You step into church, you get saved, you already have a spiritual family there waiting for you. That's what Jesus was talking about. And he wasn't talking about possessions either. And in that time, Jesus' time, it meant that they used to live in communes, not in compounds, in communes, meaning they all lived together to take care of one another. As somebody later on in the book of Acts, we learned that they all took care of each other. They sold lands and cared for those who had less. So this is the mentality, or this is the concept that Jesus is speaking to them about. You lose your family, but now I'm going to give you a spiritual family, and even though you may have lost your livelihood, they're going to take care of you. That's what Jesus is referring to in this present time. So it wasn't that Jesus is saying, you lose your property, your inheritance, it's okay. I'm going to have you win the lottery, millions of dollars. Now, that's not what he was talking about. Okay. So now let's go back to Matthew and let's jump into chapter 20. Because all this now connects to chapter 20. Verse 1, Matthew. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. Now, Jesus is using this example or this story to further expound or expand on the answer that he was giving Peter. And I wanted to develop it before we got into it back in 1927. And now Jesus is going to show us how each one of us, what I said earlier too, will be judged differently by our works and how we're going to be repaid. And all of us are going to be differently. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, 1 Corinthians 3:8. Now he who plants and he who waters are one, and each will receive his own reward according to his own labor. Okay, so we're equal in the eyes of God. We're the same, the one who waters and the one who plants. But each one of us are going to receive a different reward according to our work. Think in terms of, at work, especially if you work in a manufacturing area or where labor is performed, and each one of us perform different kinds of work. Supervisors are going to notice the difference of the different employees there. And often the ones who is actually working, who's not standing around just, twiddling the thumbs when, I think in terms, because I used to work at the Toyota plant, when the production line would stop, people would literally do that, just do, waiting for it to move. And supervisors were walking around. I was part of the production line at the beginning, but as I was walking around myself too, I would notice and, say, hey, why don't you just pick up a broom? Even though you already swept there, do it again. Your supervisor over there is going to notice it. Or, why don't you just move this tire, because we were handling tires. Why don't you just move this tire to the back or whatever, do something. And so that's how they could compensate it. Now verse 2, keep reading verse 2. Now, when he had agreed with the laborers, speaking of the landowner, for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. Now, the work day would begin at 6 in the morning, which meant that the landowner was already up even before 6 in the morning looking for laborers, day laborers. They would go to Home Depot or Lowe's, because that's the common place now where you go find day laborers. And he said to them, this is how much I'm going to pay you, 1 denarius, which is the common minimum wage of that time. 1 denarius to us is equivalent of almost $1. Think about that, $1. That's how much they would get paid. But this 1 denarius, because it's in weight, was more than enough to cover the day's meals or the family meals, and had a little bit extra. So they were like, yeah, 1 denarius, yeah. And so the day began at 6 in the morning and would end at 6 in the evening. So this is where he's at. He's at the beginning of the day. Now verse 3. And he went out at about the 3rd hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and said to them, you also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right I will give you. So they went. So again, the landowner, the master, he goes out at 9 in the morning, and then he goes and finds some people idle. Notice it says idle. Idle means that they were doing nothing. And so the landowner says, hey, go work for me. And whatever is right, because again, the day had already started. This is 3 hours after the fact. Go work for me, and I'll give you the right compensation, whatever is right. Let's keep reading verse 5. Again, he went about the sixth and ninth hour and did likewise. So again, he went about around 12 p.m. Now it's noontime. And again at 3 p.m. and found more people or more men in this particular case idle, doing nothing. I want you to keep that in mind. They were doing nothing. Verse 6. And about the 11th hour, he went out. This is about 5 p.m. He found others standing idle and said to them, why have you been standing here idle all day? They said to him, because no one hired us. He said to them, you also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right, you will receive. So the picture that Jesus is describing to us uh, is to see how the landowner has more than enough work to go around, has plenty of work, and he's a wealthy person apparently because he's hiring people. But he's bewildered because he says, well, why are you still here? This late in the day, you're here because the work day would end at 6 p.m. Why are you still here doing no work? It was uncommon for people to just be standing around, wondering, why are you doing nothing? Charles Spurgeon said, and I quote, why is any one of us remaining idle towards God? Has nothing yet had the power to engage us to his sacred service? Would anyone dare to say, well, because no one has hired us? Unquote. This is the reason why I began saying, how much time we spend in all these different areas of our lives. How much time we dedicate into these things, because later on we become idle because we are tired. We have consumed ourselves. We have spent our energies, our resources in other things. And the enemy has found a way to do this and make it seem like you are doing something very good. It's not a sin. It's not a sin. But he has lied to all of us into spending our week, our money, our resources, our energy, and other things that are not increasing the kingdom of heaven. Yes, we do need some time to reset. Yes, we do need some leisure time. I'm not saying you have to always go and do. But when those times that we are already overexhausted, overspent, the enemy will put into our minds, well, I'm doing this, or I'm not going to church tonight, or I'm not going to church tomorrow, or whatever day it is, or I can't serve because I deserve to relax. I deserve to enjoy, maybe a luxurious vacation. I deserve this expensive car or this beautiful house, whatever it is. But how much time did we spend in service to God? Think about that again. How many hours we spent? I want us to turn to the book of James, because when we are idle, we all of us tend to do something, and that something gets us into a lot of trouble. We end up fighting, grumbling, complaining about others and what they are, or I was going to say what they are doing or what they are not doing, maybe. James chapter 4, verse 1. Where do wars and fights come from among you? Do they not come from your desires for pleasure, the war in your members? You lust and do not have. You murder and covet and not obtain. You fight and war. Yet you do not have because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask amiss, that you may spend it on your pleasures. On your pleasures. So James is saying that the reason you don't have these things is because you are asking the wrong questions. You're asking to receive stuff that you're going to use it for your own pleasures. And when you don't have, you start grumbling, complaining, and you start wars, meaning arguments and fights. Because we have taken our eyes off of the Lord. James later on continues to elaborate in this book, in this chapter, how we need to be humble. And the only way that we can truly learn to be humble is by being with God, Jesus. Now, think about this. I think most of us have met or known or heard about the one nosy neighbor who is into everybody's business. I was sharing with somebody this meme that I saw. It's a video. You've probably seen it on social media. How there's some incident happened. There's police activity going on, and somebody in their apartment, they're vacuuming in the apartment, and they see what's going on out there, so they step outside to the balcony, and they're vacuuming the balcony. And they want to get to know what's going on. So then next thing, the camera pans out back to the police, and then back to this person. And now the person is outside of the apartment, vacuuming. And then the camera pans out again to the police activity, and now this person is vacuuming the sidewalk. The last scene is that the camera comes back to this person again, and down they're right next to the police car, vacuuming. Well, when we are idle, or when people are idle, they get into others people's business in a negative way. And they start seeing, you're not doing this right, you're not doing the other right, you're complaining and grumbling, but yet they are not stepping in. And so we need to be very careful how we how we spend our time, how we use our resources. And what I mean by resources is our time. Because while we may not have much possessions, we do have, all of us have 24 hours in one day. None of us haven't given less than 24 hours a day. And so how do we use the time that we have? Let's keep reading. Let's get back to Matthew. Because I can get on a soapbox in this one, so I won't. Verse 8. Oh, chapter 20, verse 8. So when evening had come, and the owner of the vineyard said to his steward, or you can say the foreman, call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning with the last to the first. And when those came who were hired about the 11th hour, in other words, about 5 p.m., they each received a denarius. So when the landowner called them, this is already at the end of the day, he told his foreman, hey, start paying the last person that came in to work. So in other words, the one that came in at 5 p.m., give that person his wages. Give him the full amount. 1 denarius, even though he only worked 1 hour. Now, the reason the landowner hired him at 5 p.m., he must have had, this is just me imagining, he must have had a conversation with this person or this individuals. Hey, you only got 1 hour. Show me what you got. Show me what you can do. And if you're good at it, I'll consider bringing you back into the workforce. Because we're going to see this in a little bit further developed. Now, verse 10. But when the first came, they supposed that they would receive more. And they likewise received each a denarius. So they're seeing the last person that got hired get paid first, and they got a full day's wages. So they were imagining, man, that guy only worked 1 hour. He got a full day's worth of wages. Man, we're gonna make bank. If he only worked 1 hour, what are we gonna get? Well, look at the next verse, verse 11. And when they had received it, they complained. They complained against the landowner, saying, these last men have worked only 1 hour, and you made them equal to us who have borne the burden and the heat of the day. So, can y'all think about in the Bible, where else have we seen a similar story where a person was given the equal pay even though they only did a minimal or a fraction of the work in comparison? Yeah, at the cross. When we're not there yet, we'll probably be there in about a year from now.
Read that story.
In chapter 27 of Matthew, specifically verse 44, it says that there was two robbers that were brought, or two thieves who were brought. They were also going to be crucified with Jesus. And in Matthew 24 verse 44, it says, even the robbers or the thieves were reviling him, speaking of Jesus, with the same thing. So whatever the people were to complain about, grumbling and shouting against Jesus, they, the two, were doing the very same thing. However, if we turn to Luke chapter 23, he gives us a little bit more detail about this incident with these two thieves. So Luke 23, and go down to verse 39. Luke 23:39. Then one of the criminals who were hanged blasphemed him, saying, if you are the Christ, save yourself and us. But the other, answering, rebuked him, saying, so at the beginning they were both rebuking or reviling Jesus. Now here one of them is saying, do you not even fear God, seeing you're under the same condemnation? And we indeed justly, for we receive the due reward of our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said to Jesus, Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, surely I said to you, today you will be with me in paradise. So they were both criminals. They were both guilty. They were both shouting against Jesus, but one of them got saved at that very moment. Once he got saved, he didn't have time to go on a mission trip to hand out Bibles in China. He didn't have time to go street witnessing at the Alamo. He didn't have time for anything. So his very best work that he was able to do, he witnessed to the other criminal right there. And Jesus said, surely I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. He received the very same thing that you and I are going to be receiving in heaven. So this is the story back in Matthew 20, where Jesus is saying that even though this one individual or individuals only work 1 hour, they worked as hard as the others. And they are equal. They're equal because Jesus says, am I not the right, to do whatever I want to do with my own resources? I'm paraphrasing. Yes. So this one individual did the hardest work that he could in the very little time that he had. For us, we have, I don't know how long you've been saved. I've been saved, or I should say, even though I got saved before I got here to Texas, when I got here to Texas in 2006 is when I really began to walk with the Lord. So it's been about 18 years me walking with the Lord, even though I wasted at least 4 or 5 years before. Some of us have been saved longer. We've been with the Lord longer. And while there may be glory stories of past, what's going on now? What are you doing? Or what is the Lord calling you to now? We don't have much time. We don't know how much, but we don't have much time. Because today we have a promise. We're here.
Right.
We're alive. You don't know if stepping out of this building Who knows what's going to happen afterwards? Tomorrow we don't have it promised. How much time do you have? Now let's go back to Matthew. Let's finish it up. Matthew 20, verse 13. But he answered one of them. In other words, the landowner responded to one, the one that was complaining. Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what is yours and go your way. I wish to give to the last man the same as to you. Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with my own things? Or is your eye evil because I am good? Verse 16, so the last will be first and the first last. For many are called, but few are chosen. What did Jesus meant when he said many are called, but few are chosen? Is he picking out of the crowd like, okay, you're good enough, you're not good enough? That's not what he's saying. Is that we are made equal. We are made equal in his eyes, whether you're saved or not. But few are chosen in those who receive his grace, those who accept his grace, those who accept his mercy. Those are the ones who are chosen. Few are chosen because only few will truly repent before the Lord and accept him. That's what Jesus is saying. Only few will be chosen. That went over some time, but next week, Lord willing, we're going to see Jesus predict his death one more time. And even though he's done it twice before, the disciples again are going to be like, what? Like, they're puzzled about it. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, forgive us, Lord, because we